Hello, I am Mudita and welcome back to Satisfactory. In the last video, I added a 72,000 megawatt rocket fuel power plant to my power grid. I now have over 111,000 megawatts total production thanks to my two alien augmenters. Now I don't have to worry about all the manufacturers and blenders I'm going to end up overclocking. Today I'm going to finish a couple of parts that are half done already. Then I'll be heading back out to where I'm making aluminum. That is where I'll be building my new factory. This one will produce a handful of cooling devices, radio control units, and turbo motors. Not a lot, but enough for my needs this phase. And we're starting today off at the aluminum factory. I'm going to end up running all over the world, and then we'll be back here. To explain why I'm starting here, let's take a look at the spreadsheet. The first of my half-finished projects, as some of you probably can guess, is going to be the Fused Modular Frames. Over at the factory making the heavy modular frames, I set up a real temporary setup to make the fused version. The nitrogen pipe is already laid, the beltwork for the heavy modular frame input is already done. I just need that aluminum casing. I made that temporary setup before I made a permanent aluminum factory, but now that this is built, I can easily send the aluminum casings I need over. In the past, I would make aluminum factories like this, and then I would just send out the required ingots to where they needed to go. And for some of the things, that's the best way to go. But for this, I'm going to do it a little different. Instead of shipping out the ingots, I'm going to ship out the aluminum casings. I'm going to go ahead and start with the train station, and that should be just enough space. Thankfully, this one doesn't need a lot, so I may be able to get away with just one train station. For right now, we'll just put the one that I need. This freight platform needs to be set to load, so we're all set on this end. And I can go ahead and put my floor hole. I need 50 aluminum casings, so we can just make this a Mark II, and that'll be fine. And we're just going to work backwards. And on the loading side, I really just need the small one. It just needs a small buffer. Alright, make this one a Mark II, and into the buffer. Perfect. Now with aluminum casings, there are actually two options. I just haven't unlocked the other one. But you can get a slightly better aluminum ratio if you include some copper ingots. But I need so few that it really doesn't make a huge difference, so I'm just going to go ahead and use the default for this. And the beauty of it is it means I just need one constructor. Place that right in front of here. Aluminum casing, and I need 50. So for that, I need 75 aluminum ingots, and they are going to come from over here. I'm just going to run this along the ground. I need 75 ingots, and I've already done a little bit of load balancing, so it's actually really easy just to add on to it. This was a 600 belt that got split in half, so here's 300, here's 300. Into this splitter, I split it in half again. So here's 150, that's headed off to the train, and that's packaging my rocket fuel. And then this 150 and the 300 getting grouped up, and moving on. So what I want to do is just add one more merger, and I'm just going to place this here so I can get it to snap at just the right spot. Perfect. Alright, so this belt right here is 300, and what I'm going to do is plug that into this merger instead now. Basically the same thing. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to swap this merger into a splitter. Right now it has 150 headed in, and I want to split that in half, so I have 75 and 75. Oh, I need to switch this first. Alright, so thankfully I don't actually have to delete it. This is something that took me way too long to figure out, but just in case you didn't know, if you hold Control, you can swap mergers and splitters for all the different types. I can cycle through all the different ones. Obviously, if it's the same type, then it just stacks on top. If you place the wrong one, you don't have to delete everything. I could just swap this to a splitter now. And now I can connect this. I've got my 75 going into there. Let's head down below. And now I can drop this down to here. And now I just need to find the right spot and bring some power over. And just like that, I've got the aluminum casings taken care of. Perfect. So let's take a look at the map. This train is going to follow this railway. And it's going to come all the way up here, then head down, and over to here. Thankfully, I'm transporting so few materials, it really doesn't matter how long the trip is. I'm going to hop in the train, and I'll see you when I get over there. Back in the Rocky Desert. This side of things was pretty easy, so I went ahead and took care of it. Let me show you what it looks like. We've got my personal train station. Rocky Desert 1 is bringing in my plastic and computers. And then Rocky Desert 2 is empty, so we're using this one. I've got my sign because, these definitely help. And let's go ahead and go upstairs where the logistics floor is. For 50 aluminum casings, I don't need a crazy load balancing setup, and I didn't feel like I needed the bigger storage container. But if you're only going to use the small one, since it only has one input, you definitely want to use the priority merger. So I'm going to make sure that I increase the priority for the part that's being looped back, because that's what makes the load balancing work. I've got a Mark III to unload the train, which is more than enough since I'm only doing 50. And then this right here is a Mark V, so that there's just never going to be any issues. The only way that this could have any issues is if I let this completely fill up, which would take a really long time with the amount that I'm moving. So to get down to 50, we've got a Mark I belt that gets split in half. There's 30 and 30. Split this 33 ways, regroup 20 plus the 30. My 50 heads off into the factory, and the 10 just gets looped back into the storage container. Just used old stubby to get up and over the belts, and then we just kind of group up with everything. All the throughput monitors are looking good so far. And then that heads on to the factory. And when I built this factory, I actually already built all of this, so I didn't have to add any of this, it was already here. The casings will come in right through here. They'll go up and over some belts, under the catwalk, and into the blender. Nitrogen is already completely full, and all I have to do is connect this belt right here. Right now I'm sending 2 a minute to storage. I'm going to cut that in half, but because this has taken so long to get to this point, the storage unit is completely full, so I'm really not too worried about it. I'm going to go ahead and plug this in because at 1 a minute, I've got plenty of time for that train to make its round trip. I'm going to go back to the train station and turn the train on, and then we'll see this thing come to life. So this train is going to Aluminum 2 to Rocky Desert 2. And like most of my trains, because this needs to run just not often at all, I'm going to go ahead and have it wait here. It's only moving a quarter stack per minute. So since it's just so low, it feels best to just let it wait for a long time. Which does mean that this is probably going to take like 40 minutes to actually get completely up and running. But really, I'm in no rush. I just need it to start. You're wondering why there's 2. I think it's because the summer sloop was in there. I took it out. You don't see the purple glow, and I took out all the power shards. But I think everything with machines basically takes like 1 cycle for it to kind of kick in. Kind of like when you first put in power shards and summer sloop, they don't kick in for 1 cycle. I think when you take them out, it kind of works the same way. So now this should be able to stay on at 100%. Well, it would help if I actually clocked it to 1 a minute instead of the 1.5. Just a minor detail. Now this can stay on at 100%. The first of 2 little side projects is done. Feels good to have this thing completely automated. I don't have to come over here and dump aluminum casings in there. Thankfully I only had to do that once or twice. Now I've got 1 a minute being sent to my dimensional depot, and I'm pretty sure that's going to be more than enough. Now we're on to the second side little project. And for that, I will meet you over at the electronics factory. Welcome back to my purple monstrosity. Let's take a look at the plan. Just like the last part, I'm only going to be making one supercomputer per minute. If we take a look at the requirements for that, I have the computers and high-speed connectors done and ready in this factory. I built a few extra just for this. The plastic is already automated. I just need to use a train to get it over here. That last part is the AI limiters. I do make some in this factory already. However, not enough. The reason I didn't make enough of those early on was the amount of quick wire I would need. I was limited to Mark IV belts at the time, and instead of making things more complicated, especially with the train logistics, I decided to only bring in what I could fit on one belt. Which means besides bringing in more plastic, I also need more copper sheets and quick wire. I only need one assembler and one manufacturer to get this done. But pretty much all of this work is the logistics. Here we are inside the train station. Got all of our items going up and down, and we're just going to add some more to that. Like most of the major train stations, the first one is mine, this next one is being completely used, and then we've got this one, which is only being partially used. And I do have a little bit more space, so adding on a train station, maybe? I could probably make it work. However, I don't know why I didn't plan this out just a little bit better. I just needed to give myself one more foundation. Even just a half a foundation probably would have worked. But no, I think if I want to add another train station, I'm going to have to rip out a wall. Which is probably going to end up happening in the long run. But for right now, I'm going to see if I can avoid doing that. Right now, this train station is being used to load 2 computers. That's all it's being used for right now. I feel like I can get more use out of this train and train station. Ah, perfect timing. We're back in the Rocky Desert. This is where those 2 computers ended up. So what I decided to do was make a sushi train. And this is largely possible because I'm dealing with such low quantities for all of these parts. We are currently at this train station right here. The path this train goes is it heads down here and it picks up plastic. Then it heads all the way out to my electronics factory over here. Here it picks up the computers. Then it heads back here to the Rocky Desert and it drops them off. So what I decided to do is instead of having those in 2 separate containers, now they just take up the first one. Because this train goes from this station to my electronics factory, I can now have this second freight car take all the copper sheets I need back to the electronics factory for the AI limiters. And to adjust the load balancing, it was really easy. Instead of having a lift go straight into both of these priority mergers, I just have it go the opposite direction. It goes into a smart splitter. Now the plastic snakes around here, plugs into the same system, didn't have to rebuild anything. And then when the computers come up, they feed in over here. Super easy adjustment to make. And for the copper sheets, I was already doing some load balancing, and one of these was just 10. So instead of having it merged up and going into the sink, I got to just split off the 10. Doesn't really get too much easier than that. Copper sheets are basically taken care of. Now let's move on to quick wire. I am making quick wire, and I only need 40, so I'm pretty sure I have that in this train station. However, with how small I built that whole factory and train station and the way I set up those trains, it's not going to be quite as easy to create the sushi train and get one more out of there. Instead, I built a radar tower on top of the factory. Now if we look at the map and turn on the resources, it gets a whole lot busier. But what I'm looking for is the Caterium. And there's actually a lot of it around here. And I think what I'm going to do is use this one right down here. Well, maybe not the pure. We'll save that for later. I'm going to use one of the normal nodes. So for that, it's into the cave. Lizard Doggo, please run away. I need to use explosives. I want you to run away. I'll give you a pale berry later. I just don't want you to die, buddy. Alright, so for this, I definitely know there's some spiders in here. So I'll save you all the nightmares, and I'm going to go ahead and skip ahead. The spiders have been eliminated, and now I've got tons of Caterium to play with. There's a better angle. So here are the 3 nodes. So the 2 down here are both the normal, and then the one up there is the pure. I want to leave that for when I have the Mark 6 belts, and I think I want to use all of the node. So I'm going to use this one right here, and I think I'm just going to build something inside this cave because it's a pretty big cave. I won't need a lot of machines. So if I'm going to use this node right here, I think right on top of here is a good spot. Just zoop out some foundations up here. We are making Caterium, so we might as well paint everything gold. I think I can blow these up. Excellent. Alright, so let's just plop these down just to take a look at the numbers. I can get 600 Caterium ore out of this with a Mark III miner. There is some water, and if we take a look out there, it's the swamp, so I could definitely find more water. And normally, that is my preference. If I'm going to use Caterium, I like to use the pure recipe. You get a good amount more. But for what I need in this near future right now, I can get away with just doing everything with the normal recipes. So the first step is obviously a smelter. We're going to make the Caterium ingot, and if we fully overclock this, well, that's probably not a number I'm going to want to work with. I'm going to guess it's going to be 30, but let's double check. Because if I want to plug it straight into a constructor to make quick wire, fully overclocked, it needs 30 Caterium ingots, and it'll produce 150. So to make things easiest on myself, I'm actually not going to squeeze every last bit out of this node. Instead of doing 600, I'm just going to do 540. And that will allow me to do 6 of these setups right next to each other. Each constructor will produce 150 quickwire. So what I can do is just group up 3 of them at a time, and we'll have 450 on each belt. Because I can't fit all 900 on one belt. But in typical me fashion, I needed 40, so I made 900. And here's the final product. Because this is in a cave, and I think the only time I'm going to come back here is to put miners on these nodes. I felt like keeping it simple and not using up tons of objects was probably the right way to go. I've probably noticed this in the past, or maybe not. The smelter and the constructor's power connections are lined up like perfectly when you line the 2 machines up like this. So it made doing the power just really clean and easy. But I so rarely set the machines up like this that I forget. Every once in a while you get to do a nice basic setup, like just load balancing 6 machines. And then those 6 machines just direct feed into the next 6 machines. Gotta love it. So like I said, those 2 get grouped up, they come up here, and then they go on a little journey to get out of here. I just use the small frame pillars, and then I just clip the small beam supports right over the conveyor poles. Using the curve mode, kind of got around this middle rock, and we come back over here, and then this part we got to go straight. Originally I thought going up and through that hole, because the factory's right there, would be easier, but things just did not line up well, and it just didn't look right. So I went the slightly longer route, and we just come straight out here. The curve mode just works great when you need to change direction and the height. And then the 2 belts just head on over here, and then into the factory. Once it gets to this point, just need to do a tiny bit of load balancing. 450 is going to be coming in through this lift, going into just a normal splitter. I have a Mark 1 and a Mark 4. Since this is going to try to split it in half, it should be able to keep a Mark 1 full. 450 items on the 480 belt should be more than enough to be able to keep this full without having to do my split belt speed trick. That 60 will go into a splitter. Splitting it all 3 ways gives me 20 and 20. Combine those, there's my 40 that'll go on into the factory. For now, just to get this up and running until I have all the rest of the things set up, it's just going to loop back into the merger, which is then going upstairs and into a sink. When it's time to start the factory, I'll just delete this belt and connect it to there. Alright, let's get the quick wire started and sinking. So far, so good. That's not the only belt. Let's go upstairs and make sure the other ones are the right numbers. 450 and 450. Well, it's 900 quick wire. 40 for now and 860 to use for a future factory. Good old electronics factory. It's always nice to come back and see everything just running smoothly. Like I said, only need 2 machines for the supercomputers. The assembler just needs to make 2 AI limiters. I've got the 10 copper sheets and the 40 quick wire downstairs. That's going to feed on into the very first input. Then I just need 4 computers, 3 high-speed connectors. Oh yeah, 28 plastic. Guess I still need to deal with that part. But let me show you these. For the 2 parts that are in the factory, let's just come right over here. So I've gotten most of this already set up. I'll just need to delete a couple things and replace a belt or 2, but the simple load balancing is done. I just wanted to get that out of the way. For the computers, I'm just going to need to delete this merger and this lift. This manufacturer outputs 8 computers per minute. So this splitter is going to split it in half, so 4 of it are going to go off into the factory. The other 4 go into this splitter. 2 of them go downstairs to be put on a train to make the adaptive control units, I think. And then the other 2 are going to go up here. Like I said, I'm going to delete this merger. So what's going to happen is this belt is then going to go straight across into this lift. And then those 2 are going to head right on its way to storage. I think 2 a minute is still going to be more than enough to supply my dimensional depot. For the high-speed connectors, it's similar. Just had to do a little bit more clipping instead. But it's temporary. For the high-speed connectors, I needed to use 2 machines instead of being able to do it in 1. So each one of these outputs 4. So right now, this machine is just plugged into that merger. When it comes time to start this, I'm going to delete this and just connect it into this splitter. It's going to split it in half, so 2 of them are going to go onto this splitter. That's going to get split in half, and then send 1 to get grouped up with the other 4, and those go to storage, leaving me with 3 in this merger, and those are going to head on over to make the supercomputers. The last piece to this puzzle is the plastic. Let's head back down to the train station for that. My original plan to get the plastic over here wasn't really the best, and so I'm glad that about halfway through I made a realization. So let me summarize my bad idea for you first. With this train station, I'm only using the first 2 freight platforms, which leaves me with both the 3rd and the 4th one open. I could set it so the train only drops off plastic and it just ignores the other 2 freight platforms, so that really wouldn't be an issue. It's just kind of a waste because it's going to be way bigger than it needs to be. But so far the sushi train has been working out, so let's just do it again. The other train that stops here already goes to the West Coast oil factory, so I can just combine the plastic and the rubber onto 1 freight car. Right now it's just carrying 62 rubber, so adding another 28 plastic really isn't going to make a huge difference. And what makes this even easier is this load balancing setup needed to be pushed ahead a little bit because of the rocks, which means I have tons of space to just add in a smart splitter here. So when the train comes, we're just going to have rubber go straight ahead, and then to the right, I'll do plastic, and then I can just have another belt just come right out to here, and I can just do the load balancing. Back at the good old plastic and rubber factory. But I don't need to do anything inside the factory, we just need to go downstairs into the train station. I have plenty of plastic that is currently all going to the sink, and I'm even doing a little bit of load balancing already. And this is really convenient because I'm using my split belt trick here. I'm limiting this down to a Mark 1, so we've got 60 going into this splitter, which means we've got 20, 20, and 20. And I need 28. And so I'm just going to kind of work around this existing bit. So the first step is I'm going to add a splitter, and I'm just going to go ahead and add it to the existing one. I just want to make sure it's in just the right spot. Alright, so we've got a splitter there. And then from there, we've got 1 more splitter. So going from a merger and then 2 splitters, this is basically the layout for a 5-way split. So 1 part is going to get looped back. This right here is going to be the 3/5. The other 3/5 essentially, because of the looped back part, is going to get plugged into here. And I want to use both of these because if I do a 5-way split on 20, because I'm going to unplug this one, so only 20 is going to be going into this merger. That means each of these fifths is going to have 4, so 2 of those will give me my 8. I think this merger is going to go right here. I think that should be the closest. Yep, there we go. Alright, so there's 1/5, there's 2/5, so that's 8. And now I just need to delete this one, and I'll go this way. There we go. There's 20 and the 8. Now all I need to do is connect this one right here. And now I've got my 28. So with this, I'm just going to run it right along here. And now we can just put a merger in front of here. And we'll just redo this. Make sure the next belt is fast enough. And then that 28 will get grouped up with this one. Well, maybe I should have gone one farther out. Alright, so the game may have crashed right after I got this all up and running, but hey look, it is up and running, and the numbers are right. Now I've got the 28 plastic taken care of, I think we can get supercomputers up and running. Let me show you the last additions. Like I said, we've got our smart splitter, that goes into an industrial storage container, and here's just a little bit of load balancing I needed to do. I just need to add this belt, and then this will come alive. Right now I'm just stockpiling a little bit, but I think I've got plenty of plastic built up now. This is just taking it from 60 down to 28. So we take 60, we split it into thirds. So we've got 20, that goes into the last merger. And then from here we're just doing a 5-way split. So we do 20 into a merger, and then the 2 splitters. This is the part that gets looped back. So this is 12 plus the 20. Here's the 32 that gets looped back into the storage container, leaving me with my 28. And that's going to head on into the factory that way. I didn't show it off, but the load balancing for the copper sheets is pretty simple because we're just going from 60. We're going to send back 50, and then 10 of it is right now going into a sink, but I'll just delete this, reconnect that belt. And actually, why don't we go ahead and start with this? This is going to be another quick one, so we're not going to do the stopwatch. We're going to save that for the big factory. And now I can send in the plastic. And now the quick wire. Now let's go ahead and get the other electronics sent in. There it is. My first actually automated supercomputer at the save. Feels good to finally have that out of the way. Even if it is only 1 a minute, truth be told, don't really need a ton. There's not a lot I'm going to need them for my actual build gun. Eventually I'm definitely going to need to build more than 1 a minute, but for now, this should be plenty. I now have Fused Modular Frames and supercomputers automated and filling up my dimensional depots. Now I can start working on the real project. We are back in the Eastern Dune Forest. This train station is going to get a little bit more work. Let's go ahead and go over the plan for this main factory. Here you can see all the recipes I'm going to be using. The goal is to create 3 turbo motors, 4 radio control units, and 3 cooling devices per minute. This is all of the recipes. Now let me color in everything that I'm going to be bringing in by train. All of the quick wire, rubber, silica, and copper sheets are all going to be coming in by train. The aluminum casings aren't, although I did color it the same, because those will be coming from the train station. I only need 1 machine to create all of the aluminum casings, so I'm just going to put that underneath the train station, and I'll ship those out with all the other parts. As far as actual raw resources, I need 296 iron ore, and that's going to create my motors. I need 200 raw quartz for the radio control units, and then I'll need nitrogen gas and water. If we take a look at the map, we've got the beautiful cartograph mod that shows all of my buildings and my train lines here. So here we've got the train station, there's the copper plant, here's the aluminum, all the miners. It's a really cool mod. I love being able to see the trains run along the tracks. If I show all the resources, we can take a look. So I've got the iron that I need right here, and there's some quartz right down here. And I've got an impure node. I only need 200, so fully overclocked I can get 300 out of here. So I'm going to use the impure, and I'm just going to clock it to 200. I believe there's one more node over here, but it's just out of the range. There's both a little lake and a water well. Because I only need 75 water, it's going to be much more power efficient to just put a water extractor in this little lake. And if I just back up a little more, here's the lake. So not too far from the aluminum and mainly the train station. And then the power plant's right over here. So I've been checking the power and it has been rock steady. There's been no issues. But I do like to keep checking it just in case. Every once in a while you'll get those tiny little issues and they just won't pop up for a couple hours after everything's been on. I'll keep my eye on it, but it's been pretty reliable so far. Because this is kind of an odd space to work around, I've got all of these kind of pillars sticking up out of the ground and there's not a ton of space. So I think I'm going to build this just right on top of that little pond. And I do really hope one day I can actually mine this and get rid of it, because I'm pressing E, in case you're wondering. I haven't found an angle where it works. So I'm going to guess that this one is just one of those ones that's bugged. Yeah, that still doesn't work either. I've got some foundations placed, and of course, I've trapped another bean. And he's just kind of floating there, I guess. Oh, he can get out of there. But he's still too cool to walk. We're just going to keep sliding everywhere. Oh, he can walk. This game is so silly sometimes. Well, here is the outline of the factory. I wanted to more or less cover most of the water instead of having a bit of it show through. Because this little pond is so small, I decided it would be best just to cover the entire thing. This is a decent amount of space, so I've got 11 foundations going this way. The bulk of the factory is going to be 9, but for some of it, it'll be out to 12. The little body of water goes all the way out to here, that's why there's this little section. And it gave me an excuse to not make just a normal rectangle. Now it has a little addition onto it to work around, which is actually going to come in very handy for this factory. Because the overall footprint isn't huge, I think this factory is going to end up being like 7 floors tall. To work around that rock quartz right there, I used 4 meter for most of it, and then I just used a 1 meter to get over it. And now at least I can build over that section. I only need 1 water extractor down here, so I'm going to use the handy lookout tower trick. I'm going to lock this in place, and yeah, right there looks good. And then when I grab the water extractor, I just want to make sure it's pointing in the right direction, and then when I hold control, it'll snap to it, and I can get it to snap right there in the middle. And now I can make sure, yep. And terrific. I can get 1 more row of foundations in the back. And I'll probably just fill in these sides here with half foundations. Well, I guess make this side 1 meter foundations. There we go. So I've got my 1 water extractor, and I only need 75. 1 part done. Hooray! And for right now, that's pretty much it for this floor. I'm now going to go up probably 5. And I'm going to use this floor for a whole bunch of the logistics. My thinking for this bottom floor is I'm going to have a whole bunch of things coming from the train. And I'm just going to have a belt and pipe highway come all the way down here. But only the nitrogen and the aluminum casings are just going to 1 recipe. Pretty much everything else is going to have to go to at least 2 different things. Which means I'm going to do a whole bunch of my load balancing right down here. I want to focus on getting all the machines in place and the really basic belt work done. And then we'll revisit this floor. So let me get the next floor in place. I'm sure this is plenty of space and it's not going to get super crowded down here or anything. And now I've got my second floor. So I'm going to do the same thing that I did down here, and I am going to outline the very outside with another group of foundations. Now this does cut down on the usable floor space for all my machines, but in a lot of my factories I have the catwalks going all the way around the outside, so I get a nice view of the factory and all the parts moving around. Instead of the catwalks, I'll just use the modern railing. But that's for the decorating phase, so we'll get to that at the very end. Even though it means that I'm going to have to pump the water up higher, I think it just makes sense to do everything in, I guess, a logical progression going up the tower. So this very first floor is going to be the smelters and the constructors doing the quartz. And then the next floor will have constructors, and then we'll just keep working our way up so that hopefully none of the parts have to travel back down. Hopefully the flow of everything is just to kind of keep going up the tower. For the iron smelters, I'm going to need 4. So I've got plenty of space down here because I'm not going to make things super cramped. I'm just going to add more floors. With that monstrosity in the distance, I don't really think I can make this tower too tall. Let's go ahead and place the first smelter. And then I'm going to go ahead and set the recipe. I need 296 using 4 machines, 74 for each one. And now with the recipe placed, I only have to copy and paste the whole machine. Oh, I love quality of life changes. I changed my mind. I'm going to move one all the way over. And then over here, I'm going to place my constructors. So same thing, I'm going to place 1 and set the recipe. This is going to do quartz crystal. 120 across 3 machines is 40 for each one. And of course, we're going to make these purple. And I just need 3. And this floor is pretty much done. I just need a splitter here. And then with these, we've got a splitter here and here. And then 1 here. I just need to make sure I get the right belt speed. So it's Mark II going into all of these. Which means Mark III into these. These ones need Mark II. And there we go. The last bit for the easy part anyways is this. Take all 3 belts. This side, however, a little bit different. So first we'll do the easy part and we'll just merge all these together, and you know, why not? We'll just do it, even though I could obviously just manifold it. These definitely need to be Mark II. I'm just a sucker for symmetry, and I like the way that it looks. And that's where the symmetry ends, because this next part is definitely not. We take a look at the spreadsheet again real quickly. I need iron ingots to go to 2 different places. 192 ingots go to the iron pipe recipe, and 104 go to cast screws. So I need to break down 296 into 192 and 104. If we simplify this, the ratio becomes 37 into 24 and 13. Doing a 37 way split, not the most convenient thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to split this 40 ways. I'm still going to split 24, 13, but those extra 3 are going to get looped back. And here's the diagram. So when I remember, I'm going to do this so it's easier. You can always recolor them later. So I think it's easiest to lay out all of the mergers and splitters and then go through the belts. Since I like to reduce this to the simplest version of the ratio, I need to make sure that I get all my belt speeds correct. So let's go ahead and start with the merger. And then it's going to go 2 splitters, another merger, and 2 splitters, and then 1 last merger over here. And then if we count back, merger, splitter, splitter, right here is we're going to have that little offshoot. So we've got a splitter and the final merger. Now we just need to do a little belt work. To simplify this ratio, I divided everything by 8. So now to make sure that I have the right belt speeds, I just need to make sure that I multiply everything by 8. So this first belt is 296. And then once the part loops back, this next belt is going to be 320. We split that in half, so we've got 160 here. And then this 160 is going to go all the way to the last one, but I know there's going to be 1 more belt here, so I need to make sure I go 2 meters farther out. So we'll have it go there, and then into that merger. From here, we've got 80, and then that 80 goes into that merger. From this merger, we're doing a 5-way split. So that 80 is then going to become 96. You split that in half, so you've got 48 and 48. With this 48, we're going to use all 3 outputs. So out of here, we've got the 16 that's getting looped back. And then 16 and 16. So we can just double check. This is 160 and then 16 and 16. Here's my 192. And then with this 48, we just need to split this one in half. So now we have 80 and 24. So here is my 104. And then that last part just needs to get looped back. So for that, we can keep things nice and tidy, and we'll just do old stubby here. And easiest just to make sure there's a belt on there. And we'll delete that. And then because these don't quite line up right, we'll do it on the opposite side. And there's the part that loops back. Buckle up, because that's the first of quite a few crazy ratio splits we're going to have to do in this one. But that's it for this floor. Let me build the next one, and we'll move on to constructors. Moving on up. Taking a look at the spreadsheet again, I'm going to take care of the cast screws, the iron pipes, the stators, rotors, and motors on this floor. It sounds like a lot, but it actually doesn't need that many machines when you start overclocking everything. But I am going to have to use my space somewhat efficiently, so I'm going to start right here on the very edge. And I'm just going to center the constructor right on that foundation. That looks good. So let's set the recipe. These are going to be doing the cast screws. I need 416 across 4 machines, so 104 for each one. As far as constructors go, I just need one more. This one is doing the iron pipes. For that, I need 48. Thankfully, 4 machines, nice and easy. So that's all I need for splitters. And then I'll just mirror it on this side with the mergers, because I should have enough space. Moving on to assemblers. I think that should give me plenty of space, so let's line them up on this thing. So for this first one, I just need 1. And for that, I actually need the BAM. This is one of those recipes that I'm not actually sure if I've ever used. I'm so used to just trying to avoid screws at all costs, because I think everybody has nightmares after their first playthrough of just way too many screws, especially early on, before you have belts that can really handle them. And then once you find out there's recipes that can get you away from screws, you just never look back. And that has been me for a long time. So I wanted to keep an open mind, and the copper rotors are actually a really nice recipe, especially when you have the higher end belts. Now I can pick the copper rotor alternate, and with just one machine, I can make 24 rotors a minute, and that's not even all of them. One machine can actually make 28 and an eighth. That part is pretty nice. The next assembler is actually going to get flipped 180. I'm going to have this one facing the opposite direction. This one is going to bring the rotors and stators together and make my motors. And for that, I need 12 a minute, so just one machine. Over on this side, I just need 2 more. Let's go ahead and set the recipe first. Instead of the normal stator recipe, which uses just normal wire, I'm going to be using the quick wire stator. I need 24 in total, so each one will be making 12. And now I can just copy and paste that machine. And then back here, I just need to group up both of these machines. That feeds in on this side. The rotors will feed on this side. That looks better though. I've just got really basic belt work to do, but a lot of the easy stuff is going to be like that. And then group up these machines. I just need 2 splitters to load balance those 2 machines. Let me go ahead and get the basic stuff out of the way and add the next floor. And here's what the really basic belt work looks like. I told you I had a plan for this section of the factory. Basically going to be my part elevator. So everything should feed up, thankfully. So most parts will branch off, and then a couple parts will then come back, and then they'll continue their journey up. So far, pretty straightforward. And the factory grows. Now that I've got motors out of the way, we can start working on all the other stuff. This floor is going to take care of the circuit boards, the heat exchangers, and the cooling systems. I'm going to start with an assembler, and I want to give everything a good amount of space. I think everything's just going to be in one line right down here. I am going to have to do a little bit of load balancing on this side, so I want to make sure I have space and not make it too cramped. So I think this looks good. Let's set the recipe. The default recipe uses aluminum sheets and copper sheets, but I don't actually want to use the default. Time to go through all of my alternates in the MAM again. There we go. The good old heat exchanger. Instead of aluminum sheets, it's using aluminum casing, and instead of copper sheets, I'm using rubber. I need 70 heat sinks in total, and I'm going to use 3 machines to do it. So each one is going to do 23 and a third. Alright, so normally if you slam them right next to each other, the spacing isn't great in my opinion. So unless I'm really pressed for space, I like to nudge them just 1 meter apart. And because now it lines up right on the middle of a foundation, and these are in kind of convenient spots for belts. Now one of the inputs lines up on the half foundation, one on the seam, and so I try to keep that spacing because I think it's just a little bit more convenient that way. And then I have one last machine, and since this one's different, I'll space it out just a tiny bit more. This one's making circuit boards using the silicon circuit board alternate recipe, but I only need 20. Oh, let's go ahead and paint you green. And then last step is the blender. This big guy is making the cooling systems. And for this, I'm just going to use the default recipe. And I need 15, so just one machine completely overclocked. This floor has mainly just the basic belt and pipework that'll skip. And here we've got the basic belt work done. Here's the load balancing for the heat exchangers. I actually already recorded it, but then I realized that pretty much all of the numbers I said were off the top of my head and they were all wrong. So I'm just going to cut that out and let me show you. I'm making 70 heat exchangers and I need 30 to head over to this blender. The other 40 are going to go upstairs. So to do a 7-way split, we're going to split it 8 ways and we're going to loop back one of them. So the 70 goes into a merger. And then we split that in half. So half of it is going to go off. Because this right here is going to end up being the 4/7. With the other 4/7, we split that in half. So half of it goes to the very end, to the merger. So that's going to be 20. The other 20 then gets split in half. And here's the 1/8 that gets looped back to the beginning. Editor move here. I still didn't do the greatest job of explaining things. I hope it made sense to most of you. If you are curious about how the looping amounts back into the beginning works and why it doesn't continually increase and clog everything up, I made an in-depth video about the 5-way split, and the same principles apply here. We're still warming up to where it's going to get real exciting. But that's not quite yet. This floor is going to be another easy floor. On this floor, I just need 3 manufacturers. I might as well get them more or less centered. And let's set the recipe. This one's going to be doing the silicon high-speed connector alternate recipe. I need 20 across 3 machines, 6 2/3 each. And that is all that's going to be happening on this floor. Nothing too fancy for the belt work for the manufacturers. And thankfully they're all going to the same place, so I get to just group them up, and then we're just sending them upstairs. Up to this floor. So the final floor for machines anyways. I just need another set of 3 manufacturers. So the 2 on this side are both going to be making my radio control units. Except for I don't want to use the default. So again, to the MAM. For this, I want to use the radio connection unit. I'll be making 10 in total, so 5 for each one. And then for the last manufacturer, that one I'm going to spin around. And this one's going to be making the turbo motor. And again, it's just some more basic belt work for at least plugging things in. The only thing is I do need to split up the radio control units. 6 of them are going to go to turbo motors. The other 4 are actually going to go upstairs because I'm going to add one more floor. And that's where I'm going to put my storage and then the sink for the overflow. I thought about trying to cram it in up here, but I realized that's what it was going to be, is just really cramped. If it's already this tall, what's one more floor? Now it has the final floor to the turbo motor factory. And I'm going to continue to get lots of use out of my small storage plus dimensional depot blueprint, because none of these items I need in huge amounts. So a small storage container with 1 dimensional depot is going to be more than enough. So that's 1 for turbo motors, 1 for radio control units, and 1 for the cooling devices. Thankfully, some of the other parts that I've made in earlier steps, like the heat exchanger and the circuit boards, are just intermediate parts, and there's nothing that I need for my build gun, so nothing in the build menu uses either of those parts, so I have no reason to save them, that I can think of anyways. And then I'll have my sink in the corner. I just need a couple smart splitters, and that part's going to be really easy to set up. Well, the machines are in place, and there's some belt work done. There's quite a bit left to do though. Normally, I really like to get my train sorted out and any of those kind of logistics early on because it gives me plenty of time to go and check on them and make sure that the numbers are all looking right. Normally with trains, they need to complete a couple cycles so you can get a more accurate throughput number. So that's why I like to take care of it early. But with this factory, I'm bringing in 4 different things, and in total, there's actually 6 things coming from the train station, including the nitrogen pipe. And I'm going to have my belt and pipe highway basically come down here, miss this somehow, and then they're going to plug into the factory. So I think I want to get that sorted out first, but I also want to work backwards. To try to make things as organized as possible, I want the belts and pipes to come in more or less a logical order. And that way, hopefully things don't get super messy, making, the farthest belt on the right need to plug into the farthest thing on the left and vice versa. So I want to do all of this basic belt work. All of the lifts, getting things to go from point A to point B, I kind of want to sort all of that out first because, well, there's quite a few floors and there's quite a few different things going in different places. There are a whole bunch of lifts in place now. We'll start at the top and kind of work our way down. For the most part, this was just connecting point A to point B and trying to make it not look bad. Up here is where all the final products are going to go, and I've got my smart splitter set up so that the overflow will go to the top line of mergers and then on into the sink. Once we get to the manufacturing floors, it gets a little bit busier. I made sure I added lots of throughput monitors because, well, they're just fun to see. This factory is using so few machines for each recipe that balancing the machines pretty easy. The hardest part is going to be down below, but we'll get to that in a second. For the radio control units, I just needed to do a basic 5-way split. Since I was only using 2 of the inputs for the merger, I just got to use that initial merger as the one where I looped it back. And this way, 3/5, or 6 of them, go on to make the turbo motor, and the other ones go up to the storage. Pretty standard way to balance 3 manufacturers. And then we've got more throughput monitors. And then this floor had both the belts and the pipes. It got a little bit more crowded, but hey, there's still no clipping. I was able to get most things lined up pretty well so that I didn't have to do this and cross over a bunch of belts to get it into the right spot. But this line right here is an output, so it was a little bit more tricky to find where I could put it. This floor also has all of its belt work done. Pretty simple here. The only part that didn't quite line up was this bit right here. Without this lift, I can't make this right turn through this gap, and it would have to do like a really weird bend. So this was the neatest way I could come up with. And then once you get down to this floor, it's pretty much just a wall of lifts. And then we have the bottom floor. I've got everything nice and labeled, and so my thinking is once I had this laid out, it would be much easier to figure out which belts I want to be coming in from where, and then I'll build my belt and pipe highway back to the train station and sort it out from there. My hope is that I can keep things slightly neater going about it this way. Unfortunately, not everything is grouped up right next to each other. That would have been nice, but of course that's just asking way too much. I kind of figured that would happen. But I think I'm going to start with the copper sheets, and I guess I'll just work my way this way. So I'm going to designate this one the copper sheets. As we can see, I need the copper sheets to split 44 into this lift, and 48 into this one. And here's the diagram I'm going to use to do that. Alright, so since we're working in this space right here, I'm actually going to work slightly backwards, but hopefully me highlighting it on the diagram makes it a little bit easier. I'm going to start with that second splitter, because I know I need more load balancing on this side, and I need to make sure that I clear this foundation. So that's the second one. Here's the first one. And to start everything, we've got a merger. Alright, so I've got 92 copper sheets headed into here. But let me place the rest of the splitters and mergers. I've got 2 splitters, now I just need 2 more. 1 and 2. And then right next to those, I just need 2 mergers. To make sure I have the correct belts, I just need to multiply all of these numbers by 4. Meaning I can use a Mark II for this one, and I think everything else is a Mark I. So we can connect all of these in a straight line. And now this splitter connects to this merger. and then so does this splitter. This merger feeds into this merger, and then this splitter is going to use all three outputs, which means I need to actually spin that merger. There we go. And now this part needs to loop back to the very beginning. But out of this very first splitter is my 48. If I bring it up to the ceiling, I have a feeling the load balancing is going to extend out to here a bit. So I don't really want to block off all of this. So I think for this, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. Because then I can still stack 2 belts and get into both of those lifts. So I'm going to delete this one. And there's my 48. Out of this merger is my 44, and that one I am going to run to the ceiling. Because it's going to go to this one right here. And now with this lift in place, I could go around it, but like I said, I've got a bit more load balancing to do, so I think to be a little bit more space efficient, I'm going to use old Stubby and have it run right across the top. And that's 92 split into 44 and 48. So far so good. Next I'm going to do silica, because that's 250 and 44. The total amount of silica is 294, so I've got a Mark IV belt out of here. Since I can tell this space is already getting a little bit busy, I think I'm going to push this one out to over here. See, and we'll just have it so that one can just run straight into this splitter. And then when I branch off here, because this is actually going to be the second splitter again, I wanted to make sure that it has clearance for this. And I think we should have enough space. So this right here is that second splitter. This one is the first splitter. And then here is the initial merger. So this is where the Mark IV gets plugged in. There's my 294. But again, let's go ahead and place all the splitters and mergers. Going from the second merger, we just need a merger right over here in the corner. And that'll group up my 125. To the right of the splitter, I'm going to place a merger, 2 splitters, and then another merger, followed by 2 more splitters. And then I just need 2 more mergers. So the very last one here is just going to go to the left of the last splitter. And the other one is going to go right next to the second splitter on this side. Alright, let's go through all of the belt work. So for this ratio, I was only able to divide it in 2, which does make the math for making sure I have the right belt speeds correct a little bit easier. So instead of 150, this is actually going to be 300. Split that in half. I've got 150 here. The other 150 will plug into the side of that merger. From here, that 150 gets split 3 ways, so we've got 50 and 50. And then the last 50 goes here. So that's 50, 50, and 150. I've got my 250 right here. So that one is done. Now to do the rest of this. That 50 goes into a merger, and then you can probably spot the pattern already. We're doing a 5-way split. So once we have the part that loops back, that 50 is actually going to be 60 on this belt. Split that in half, that's 30. That's 30. Split this all 3 ways. We've got 10, 10, and this is the 10 that loops back to make it all work. So we've got 40 on this merger, heading on up to the next one. With this 10, we're doing another 5-way split. So that 10 is going to be 12 on this belt. Splitting that 12 in half, we've got 6 here. And with this final 6, we're splitting it all 3 ways. And you know what? I think I can just spin this one around to make things a little bit easier here. So that was my 40, and each of these are 2. So here's my 44. Now for the parts that loop back. So this needs to get plugged into here. But this part right here needs to get looped back to the very beginning. And so for that, we're going to go ahead and use old Stubby again. And then this one can just loop right around here. And now this one is the 44, which is the second one. So for now, I'm just going to leave it like that. So we've taken care of the copper sheets and the silica. Aluminum is just going straight to one spot. No load balancing needed. The quick wire is by far the easiest to do, and it can fit in probably the smallest amount of space, so I'm going to leave that to last. Which leaves me with rubber, which unfortunately is probably the worst one because it needs to go to 3 places. My 312 rubber needs to get split 210, 30, and 72. I was kind of running out of space, and so I figured the easiest thing, just lay down some more foundations. And at least the glass ones let me see what's going on underneath. So I did change some stuff just a little bit, and so let me just delete this section so you can see it. But functionally, it's all the same. But I decided to just move this one up so I could just use less lifts, at least in this front area, so that I could keep the glass foundations a little bit lower and extend them all the way out. And then when the lifts came up, I just use a floor hole. And then this way I could just run this one all along, and then there's a little bit less on the ceiling, and hopefully this is a little bit easier. And so now, I may not need all of this space, but I figure might as well just place it all and make it easier on myself. The lowest common denominator for all the numbers in my ratio was 6, and so that's how we get to the numbers that we're dealing with. So the rubber is going to be the next one, and yeah, we're just going to have it come right up here. And since more is looping back, I figure we'll just clear this lift right here to make sure I have enough room for everything. The final row will go right here, and that way I'll have enough room for the lifts that I need to put on that side. Which means this initial column, I guess, is going to be 1 meter in from here. Alright, so there is the very first merger, and that's probably not in the right spot. From here, I just need 4 splitters in a row. And then working my way back, I need 3 mergers. And then from this splitter, we're going to branch off and do the rest of this. I'm just going to delete these belts to make it easier to work with and see. Can replace those later. Just to make sure I have my spacing right, I think it's actually going to be easier just to do a little bit of belt work here. The initial 312 is going to get plugged in right here. I'm going to end up looping back a total of 12, so this is actually going to be 324. Dividing that by 3, we've got 108 on each of these. And then from here, we're going to split this one in half. So that's 54 and 54. And then with these ones, we're going to do 3-way splits for all of them. And these can all be Mark 1 belts. And so I just need some stubbies to get up and over. And then from this very last splitter, I need to use the last output. And we can go ahead and spin this one that way. Never mind, we are going to split it that way because now I need this one to be able to get up to the roof. So here is my 210. That one needs to be Mark 3. Now that I have those lifts in place, it's a little bit easier to make sure I have enough space. So now let's split up the rest of this. So this first splitter is going to be lined up with this input because this one needs to make a right turn into here. Which means that that very last merger needs to be on this side. So I'm going to go ahead and place this one first. But that means everything else is going to be lined up wrong. So actually we are going to just move it up to here. So now that one can be up to there. Alright, that's much better. Here's the belt that we're working with. So this is 108 coming out of that splitter. Going into this one. If I use all 3 outputs, I've got 36 on each one. So there is my 72. From here, I just need 2 more splitters and a merger. So we'll place one here, one on the other side of that lift, and then a merger right here. And I just need a bunch of Mark 1 lifts, so we'll connect that splitter into this one. This one I just need to use 2 of the outputs. And then this one I need to use all 3. Out of this one is my 30. And this right here is what I need to loop back to the very initial merger. Okay, so it does look a little crazy, but it wasn't that bad, right? And then the last bit for the quick wire. So like I said, it's the easiest one because all I need is a splitter and a merger. If I have 780 going into one end, if I use all 3 outputs, it's going to try to put 260 on each one. But if I keep the belt speed under 260 for each one, it should be just fine. So if I put a Mark 1, that would be 60, and then a Mark 2, that one's 120. So right here is my 180, leaving me with 600 out of this output. So I think for that, I can probably squeeze it in just this space right here. Well, the concept was the same, but gotta get a little bit more interesting to make it all fit. So we've got the quick wire going into there, Mark II lift, and a Mark I lift. So here's my 180, and that goes over to there, and snakes around over to here. It's the one part that didn't quite line up right, but that's where the free spot was, and that was the best I could do. For the 600 line, it had to kind of snake around here, and then it goes up and in. Things started to get a little bit more busy when I put all of the belts on the ceiling. But there's still no clipping. Just some good old organized chaos. I love it. And now I know the order for all of the belts, and now I can start building my belt highway. My original plan was to just kind of follow the ground right here, and just head on up. And we would just kind of snake around. But with 5 belts in one pipe, I started it, and I just wasn't really happy with the way it was turning out. So we went back to what I know, building more blueprints. So this one, we'll just put this randomly in the air here. Here's the flat section, and all of the belts are in the correct order, at the correct speeds, and even the right colors. So I've got all the belts and the pipe, and then I also made another version with the 2-meter ramp. And I'm hoping with the auto connect, maybe this will be a little bit quicker. Instead of my original plan of keeping this really low to the ground and snaking it around here, what I think I'm going to do is use some lifts and bring everything up to this level. And then a whole lot of this can just be a ramp and nice and straight and not have to deal with the curve this way. I'll just do most of the curve right down here. After a little bit of trial and error, this is what I've come up with. So like I said, coming from the train, a whole lot of this gets to be just nice and straight, which makes things a little bit easier. And then good old curve mode to take me home. And then just a bunch of lifts to take it down to the bottom floor. I like the way this turned out, for most of it. And from a distance, I think it looks good. But once you get real close to it, you can probably notice it is not perfect. So let me show you the issue. So with this, let me just delete these. We'll just delete all of this. Alright, so to make the blueprint, this is what I did. I had an extra ramp on either side. And then I just took the appropriate belt. Got it lined up in the right spot. Placed one at the bottom, one at the top. That obviously gives you that little bend in the beginning and right there at the end. And you know what? Let me just show you what I did for the pipe at the same time. So I used Auto 2D because if you cycle through all the different ones, I think it gives you the straightest pipe on a ramp. So the concept is essentially the same for both, it's just what piece you use. So for pipes, I just use a pipeline junction, and I would get it to snap right at the edge of the foundation. So I'd place one there, and then one here. And then holding control, it'll snap in place. And I can do that to both sides. And now what I can do is just delete this extra. And then delete the pipeline junctions. And then the belts work the same way. I can use a merger or a splitter, but I'm just going to put it right on the edge of the foundations. Hold control, snap it onto the belt, and then delete the extras. And now I can delete my mergers. And now I've got a really straight belt and pipe that don't have that weird curve on both of the ends. So my thinking was, using the Blueprint Auto Connect, I should be able to get these just spaced out just right, and it would work. I'm sure that I'm probably either a meter or even a half meter just off in one direction. Either it needs to be forward a little bit, or maybe it needs to be back, or I need to nudge it up a half a meter or down. I'm sure the way that I placed it was really close. So I could probably spend a long time trying to fiddle with it, but in reality, this ramp really isn't that long. And sure, there is 5 belts in one pipe, but just doing this manually really isn't going to take me that long. And what I mean by that is I'm just going to delete what I've done, because things aren't spaced out quite well enough for me to keep the same pillars, because that's most likely part of the problem. So I'm just going to zoop out a whole bunch of foundations. Then I'll drag out my conveyors pretty much to as far as they'll go. I usually go to the closest either half foundation or full foundation. Because normally that curve only lasts less than a half foundation, which means that I could use this right here as a great spot to split them. Once I have all of my belts up to here, I'm going to do exactly what I showed earlier. Just place a splitter or merger right here. I can do all of them at once. Delete the top part, delete all of these, and now they're both cut off at the exact same spot. So what I'm going to do here is actually delete these. And now I've got a version 2 of this blueprint that doesn't have any belts or pipes. Once I get it lined up with this foundation, I am just going to nudge it back 4 meters and then down 1, since these are 2-meter ramps. Now, if I really wanted to, I could fake it by putting the conveyor poles here, but because of these beams, you really can't see them unless you try really hard, so I'm just not going to include them. Fake it till you make it. And then from here, I'm just going to continue this on. So we'll see how far this can stretch. So it'd go almost to there. So we'll do the same thing. Go to this point. Rinse and repeat. So let me fast forward and I'll show you what it looks like. And we're back with the new and improved belt and pipe highway. Honestly, took me less than 30 minutes. It's definitely not perfect, but I think it's better. It still goes up and down just a tiny bit, but for me, this was pretty good. And from the side, it's really not too noticeable. Or maybe my eyes are just getting old. Thankfully, I got to just leave this part the same. Well, that is another huge piece I can check off. I really only have 2 major pieces left to do here. The one I always finish with is running power throughout the factory and doing the decorating. So before that, I need to actually figure out the trains and get this stuff over here. And here's the new train station. To try to save myself a little bit of headache, I went ahead and added some labels right down here so that I know exactly how much of which items to plug onto what belt. 4 of the items will be coming by train. All of these are set to unload. Now I just need to set up the buffers. With Mark V belts, I really only need 1 lift to get all of those out of here. However, since I need 780 out of here, I'm going to need to use both. Since I have so much space, this is 5 foundations high, I think I'm just going to extend just a part of this. I'm not going to fill in this entire floor, but I'm going to do this part of it just raised up. It'll just give me a little bit of room to work with underneath, and I feel like it'll just use the space better. Because the outputs for the freight platforms are on this side of the train, I'm going to do the load balancing going this way, just in case I end up putting another train right here. That way it'll give me a little bit more space. I'll start off with the easy one. Good old quick wire. There we go. All done. Gotta love when you need exactly the amount that fits on a belt. I just need a container and then just the Mark V lift down into all of these. And now I can do the load balancing. So the first one will be copper, the next one's silica, and then the last one's rubber. And that one's quick wire. So since I did the quick wire, let's go ahead and move on to the rubber. Using my handy diagram here, this should be pretty easy. I'm going to place all the splitters and mergers, and then we'll go through the belts. I need 2 splitters, followed by a merger, and then 2 more splitters. And I guess 1 more row of foundations. Other than that, I just need 2 mergers. Now for the diagram, I felt that it was easiest to just kind of have the flow of everything going one way. However, instead of having this merger facing this way, I am actually just going to kind of flip things around. I need this merger to have this belt and one from the very first splitter. But really, the items need to go this way. So instead of having it there and facing that direction, I'm just going to flip this and I'm going to face it back this way. The merger on the other side is going to stay the same. It's going to be lined up to the right of the second splitter, facing backwards. So for this, I need 312, and thankfully everything was divisible by 24, and so that's why you see the final number as 13. So all of these numbers I multiply by 24. So instead of 20, this is 480. We split that in half. Here's 240. There's 240. Split it in half again. We've got 120 and 120. With this 120, we're now going to do a 5-way split. So the 120 will become 144. And we split this one in half. So there's 72. 72 plus the original half on this belt, which was 240. There's my 312. To finish everything else up, we have that same amount going into this splitter. And then I need to use all three outputs. Alright, so there's a couple different ways you could rearrange these last few belts, but I am going to do it just like I did in the diagram. So I'm going to use old stubby here. And I think that means I'm going to have to rearrange this belt just slightly. If I wanted to get rid of this accordion and have both of them sunk in by an extra meter, what I could have done is merge this in like this. But then the belt wouldn't line up right down the middle of these. It would be 1 meter to the side. But it would make the lift fit inside of this gap. But the rest of the look I wouldn't be real crazy about. So instead, we'll just extend this by 1 meter. So instead of right there, we'll just go to here. There's the 240. And there's the 72. And then on this side, we've got 24 here. And 24 that wraps around there. And then here is the 168 that gets looped back into the storage container to make this whole thing work. For the output of the rubber, I'm just going to put a floor hole here, mark for lift. And then from there, I'll probably set up some sinks so that I can get this up and running. Onto the silica. For this one, I need 294. Like always, I'm just going to follow my handy diagram that I made ahead of time. So we've got a merger, followed by 4 splitters. For the side that loops back, we just need 2 mergers, and that goes 1 on the side of the very first splitter here. And then we skip the middle one, and then the second to last one also has a merger. On this side, I'm going to do the same thing I did with the rubber. And I'm actually going to have the direction head this way, but same concept. I need to use this output, so I'm going to line up the very first merger on this side facing towards me. And then I just need 2 more. And that's all the splitters and mergers. Just a couple. With this one, we're working with 480. And I could have worked with just that, because when I reduce it, I'm working with 80. However, 81 is actually an easier number to work with. Even though 80 is a nice round number, it still means I'm going to have to do 5-way splits. Whereas working with 81, so starting with 80 and then just looping back 1, because 81 is a power of 3. And I think that's just a little bit easier to work with. So my 480 will then become 486, so I need to make sure that this one is a Mark 5 belt instead of the Mark 4. We divide 486 by 3, we've got 162. We divide that by 3, these are going to be 54 on each one. And I forgot this one, I'm going to need to use my little stubby lift trick. I guess I don't have to. I just like the way they look. Which means I'm going to need to extend this by 1 meter. And then from here, let's see, this is 54. So we divide that by 3, and we've got 18, 18, and 18. Divide that, and we've got 6, 6, and then this 6 is the one that needs to get looped back to the very beginning. And for that, I'm just going to go up to the normal height, since I already used the second level. And there we go. Just a couple last belts. So this right here should be 30. Which means this one will be 186 getting looped back into the storage unit. And on this side, we just need to make sure we've got the right belt speed. That would be 6 and 18. So here's 24. Both of these are 54, so this should be 132. Plus the 162 from that first belt, and I've got my 294. Now I'll just put a floor hole and do the same thing. 3 down, 1 to go. And here's the diagram for the last one. I don't know why 92 seemed like it was a more complicated one than all the rest of them. But thankfully, I just have to follow my diagram. So starting from the storage container, we've got a merger, and then 5 splitters. This is kind of the final product side that I need. So I'm going to do the same thing where I line things up backwards. So first merger will go here. I don't need this output, but I need the third one, and I need the fourth and the fifth. So I just need one more right there. On the other side, I need a couple more. So we've got the merger, splitter, splitter. To the left of the second splitter, we'll go another splitter. And then that one is going to come back down this way. So we've got a splitter here. And then I just need a merger on the side of both of these. So far, so good. All of these numbers are divided by 4. So instead of 30, this is 120. Which means this one is 128. And we're going to split that in half a whole bunch of times. So I've got 64 here, 64 here. 32, 32. 16, 16. 8 and 8. There's 4. And there's 4. So let's just work our way backwards. So that one was 12. 4, 8, 16. So here's 28. Plus the 64 from this first one. There's my 92. So there is the final amount done. Now just to do this last part. So this branched off 16 right here. So we're going to split that in half. So there's 8 and there's 8. This 8 is going to get split in half. So half of it is going to go back into the initial merger. So we go from 120 to 128 and make all this work. But that needs to get split in half. So that bit goes into the merger. Connect these two. And there's the 28 that gets looped back to the storage unit. Okay, so I think this is all of the hardest load balancing we had to do. Should be easy sailing for the rest of the video. Now I just need to run around and set up the trains on the loading side. I've got my smart splitter set up, so the way I like to do these is I just slap these onto the existing belt, and then I have it set so the only option is to go right into the sink. And that way when it's time to start the factory, I just delete this, it'll repair the belt, and then all of the items will just head on into the factory. And this will let the trains run for a while, make sure that the throughput numbers are looking good. And that I actually did all of this load balancing correctly. Besides all the colors, you probably noticed one new belt. And that's because as I was looking at the map, I realized I could really better utilize my trains. I already have a train that's running in between here, the aluminum factory, and the rocky desert, which is where the copper sheets are coming from. It's only 2, and there's a second freight platform available over at the rocky desert. But I am lazy, so instead of moving this whole setup, I'm just going to run a belt to the setup that I already built. But that's much better utilization of my existing trains, and now this new train doesn't need to go to the rocky desert at all. I get to just completely cut out that stop, so it just makes a whole lot more sense to do it this way. Now, this train only needs to pick up 3 different parts, and 2 of them are coming from the same factory, so this only needs to make 2 stops to pick everything up. Just happens to be that the rubber is like the farthest station from here. If I would just complete my train line, it would be much quicker. But I really don't want to, and I don't think I need to. If I take a look at the items that I'm bringing in by train, the quickwire obviously looks the most intimidating because it's 780 per minute. But to be able to compare these easier, let's convert all of these to stacks per minute instead of items per minute. And now you see that I'm actually bringing in quickwire and rubber at the exact same rate as far as the train is concerned. And the silica isn't too far behind. The copper sheets, I don't think I'm going to have to worry about at all. So at 1.56 stacks per minute, I actually have a pretty long time. Even if I round it up to 2 stacks per minute, freight cars have 32 stacks. That means this thing needs to complete its round trip within 16 minutes. Keeping in mind each time it stops, you've got a 30-second time for it to do its load or unload. 2 stops to pick up things, 1 stop to unload. There's 1.5 minutes of my round trip. But I still think that should be plenty of time. I feel like we've done quite a bit of load balancing and ratio splits so far, so I'm just going to kind of highlight the rest of them. But I will share all of the diagrams that I use to make any of the more complicated ones. Thankfully here at Rocky Desert 2, it was super easy. Like I mentioned, the same train that's bringing over the aluminum casings is now going to bring back all of the copper sheets. And if we come upstairs, we can see the continuation of all the chaos. Thankfully, I save all my diagrams, so I knew exactly what was going on with all of this. I probably could have added a couple more signs to let me know. But I basically could mess with anything that came off of this belt. Everything else was already being balanced, and being sent onto that first train. And then I had already done a little bit more load balancing. I used the smart splitter to split off 60, and then I have 20 going off onto that train, and then 20 of it is going into the nearby factory, meaning I had this bit to work with right here. And after all of that, I still had 212 copper sheets going straight to the sink. 212, and I need 92. Well, that's 120. So I could have done a whole bunch of different load balancing, but instead I just slapped a Mark III belt to make up for any of the gaps. But then down here, I just have it limited to a Mark II lift and belt. And that sends 92 to my train. Let's go take a look at the rubber. One of these days I'm going to decorate this train station, but that's not today. Instead, I got to add another train station. Instead of adding extra freight platforms that I'm probably not going to use for this one, I just filled it in with the empty platforms with catwalks. 312 rubber. Let's go downstairs and see how I did it. I just have the small container for the storage buffer, and then that is coming from all the way over here. This one did get a little bit bigger than most, but here's the diagram, and unfortunately I couldn't really reduce this one a whole lot, so it just ended up being kind of crazy. And to save you from me just reading out a whole bunch of numbers that I may or may not even get right, I figured I would just put the throughput monitor here, and it's close, right? Just one of those numbers that gives me a really kind of funky pattern. But it seems to be pretty accurate so far. And I have a whopping 71 rubber left over being sunk right now. That probably means at some point I'm going to have to make more. Here's our last stop, the electronics factory. It ended up working out really nicely that the last two freight platforms were empty and they weren't going to be using any of the same items that the first two were. So with the right settings, I could make sure that the new train didn't pick up or drop off anything into the wrong spots, and it only dealt with the last two. For the quick wire, let's head downstairs. So all that extra quick wire that I made in the cave earlier, I kind of had a plan for it, and that's what this was. The only tricky part with doing this sort of a thing is getting a completely full belt. I don't actually think that I need the priority merger. I thought that the priority merger would smooth things out. So the truth is, this is actually 450 coming in on this belt. And same thing with this one. This one's 450. I'm doing just a tiny bit of load balancing. From that 450, I'm taking out a 60 belt, and then I'm splitting it three ways, 20, 20, and 20. There's 40 going off into the factory with quick wire that's phasing in and out of existence there. And then the remaining 390 is going into this splitter. I'm just splitting off another 60, leaving me with 330. So if I add in the 450 coming in from this belt, there's my 780. But the problem is, if I make both of these Mark IV belts, this all of a sudden is going to have gaps every once in a while. See, there is one. And this belt is going to start to back up ever so slightly, even though this has the priority set. And I think the issue is, because this is a Mark V belt, we've got 60 seconds in a minute, which means that there is a spot on the belt every 0.076923 seconds. But both of these belts can only bring items in at a 480 rate. So even though it seems like it should all work out, and it should be a completely full belt, the best way to do something like this is to have both of these Mark V. With both of these at the same speed as this belt, it's going to have no issues keeping up. Now, the only problem is I did that for so long that now they backed up a little bit. So I probably need to just clear out a couple. And there it goes. And now there's not going to be any issue. This will stay at a completely full 780 belt. So if you're ever having trouble getting a completely full Mark V or Mark VI belt, make the belts before it have the same speed, and you should have a much easier time. And for the silica, I did all the load balancing upstairs. I'm already doing a little bit of load balancing because I needed the silica for the circuit boards. However, I decided to just make twice as much as I needed. And each set of 3 was making 350 silica per minute. And I need 294. And to fit it in the space, I just kind of had to turn it sideways here. But here's the load balancing, and here's the diagram. Thankfully, this really wasn't too bad, because if you simplify the ratio, I needed to split 25 into 21 and 4. Which means I do a 5-way split, and then with one of those fifths, you just do another 5-way split. And then that 4 is this belt right here, which groups up with the existing 162 that it was splitting off from that first group of 3. Now I'm left with 218 silica still going to the sink, and it's still available for a future project. The 294 just goes right down below into the madness of the logistics floor down here, and then goes down 2 more levels and then into the train. The train has now been running for a little bit, so as we can see, everything is running nice and smooth. And now I can check my throughput monitors. So quick wire looks good. 312 for the rubber. 294 for the silica. 295 is close enough. And then 92 copper sheets. Things are looking good so far. Nitrogen, I just have to turn on, and I don't really have to worry too much about that. So here's the last piece. Aluminum casings. I need 210 per minute, so just one assembler overclocked. This one, I am going to use the alternate recipe where you use a little bit of copper ingots, and it saves you a little bit on the aluminum side of things. It's not a lot, but it saves me like 35-40 aluminum ingots, and I've got plenty of the copper ones. So for both of those, let's just follow the belts back. Start with the aluminum. It is this one right here. So with this one, it wasn't too bad. I just needed to go from 540 down to 280. And so right now, this belt is running all the way through, but I'm just going to delete it, plug it into this first splitter, and then plug this merger back into the belt. And here's the balancing for the 140 copper ingots. I have 2 belts of 750 coming in, so I was already doing a little bit of load balancing. That 750 comes in here, gets split 3 ways, so I've got 250 on each of these belts. With this one, I did a whole bunch more load balancing just to split off 10 that went off into that factory. And then I was just regrouping everything else and sending it to a sink. So what I'm going to do is split off one of these 250s, and then I'm going to reduce that down to 140. And then the remaining bit is going to get grouped back into the mergers and continue on into the sink. Actually, let's go ahead and start with that now. I really don't need this merger anymore, so I'll probably end up deleting it. And now the last part is up to speed. Now I have all of the parts I need in the right amounts that I need them in. I just need to turn on 2 miners for the iron ore and the quartz. And I guess I probably need to get that quartz belted over. So that is the last step. The quartz is actually right there. So I just need 1 belt that's going to go on its own little journey through here somewhere and into the factory. Besides adding that 1 belt, it's just the decoration and then making sure everything has power. Let's do the usual and skip ahead. So the save is currently at 224 hours and 30 minutes. Let's see how long all this takes me. Welcome back to the new turbo motor factory. One of the things you may have noticed is that I moved all the sinks down here. It's going to make the startup process a whole lot easier having them here. And it meant I got to see my belt highway in action a little bit sooner. With this section back here, I wanted to kind of highlight it, so I just used a bunch of large billboards. But this section right here fits 1.5 of the billboards. And with these ones, when you overlap them, the lines still show up. But for this, I kind of like the 9 square pattern. Before we get to the inside of the factory, let's go visit the outside parts. Very basic iron node. Just need to connect a cable from there to there, and that'll get it turned on. And then if we come to the other side here, I indented my wall just a little bit because this is indestructible, and I didn't want to just hide it inside foundations. And if we keep heading on this way, we have another sink because I decided to get the quartz turned on a little bit early since it has a little bit of a journey, and it only needs a Mark III belt, so it's easiest just to turn it on now, and then when I'm ready to send this in, I can just delete the smart splitter. From the factory, it just comes to this point, and then I had it drop down. I really do like the curve mode for this sort of a thing. I thought about using ramps so that this could follow the ground a little bit closer, and if I wanted to spend the time on it, it probably would have looked a little bit better in my opinion. But this was much quicker and easier than trying to work with the ramps to go up and turn. That can get a little bit tricky to try to make everything flow nicely and not look weird. So instead, I try to have nice long straight sections, and then when I couldn't anymore, I just used the lift, and then just try to keep it at that height as long as possible before I needed another lift. We just have a little bit farther to go. We just snake around here. And this is the source of the 200 raw quartz. Let's take a look at the actual factory. I decided to go with the coated concrete on the outside, and then on the corners, I just used the outer corner extension. Now, I decided to go with the fix-it, and let's just go up to the top. A little bit easier, I think. Originally, I was going to keep it coated concrete, just like the rest of it. However, that's the Caterium finish. Just doesn't quite stand out as much, and I really wanted the corners to be highlighted a little bit more. But the only problem with the fix-it foundations is if you don't have that beam there, the sides of them are really kind of busy, and I don't like it. They can kind of look a little bit weird. So what I did was place a beam right up and down. But that's not normally where they place. So normally if you place them right on the corner, they would still leave a whole lot of that right there. So instead I just lock the hologram in place, hold control, and nudge it over that ½ meter. And now it lines up with the edge of the foundation and covers the majority of whatever that little pattern is. And I'm much happier with the way that turned out. So for the signs that kind of border all of the windows, these are actually only halfway showing. They're clipped halfway into the foundation. So it's not too overpowering, but it gives it a real nice highlight, especially with the coated concrete, because you get that extra little reflection. Pretty simple with the decorating. I didn't get too crazy, but sometimes keeping it simple looks pretty good. So I did add another hypertube, so that entrance is right next to the other one. So from the train station, you could jump in a hypertube, go to the aluminum factory, jump in a different hypertube, and head on down here. But I've also got stairs so you can get in from the ground level, which I forget to put in a lot of times. But for times like this, it's really nice to have just a normal door. And this is what the inside ended up looking like. Instead of using the normal concrete foundation for everything, I changed the one that's elevated to the polished concrete. So this is the Caterium finish on the inside. It just didn't look good enough for the outside. But inside the factory, I think it looks pretty good. So here's our first floor. Really not too much has changed. I just swapped out the very corner foundation for an elevator. So let's go ahead and go down to the very bottom floor. The nightmare of the logistics floor. Oh, look at that beautiful chaos. I decided to just delete all of the extra glass foundations that I don't need, because it makes it so much easier to see what's actually going on underneath. I like the glass foundations. I just wish there was a way to make them less reflective, which I know sounds weird, but sometimes I just want to actually see through them instead of the reflection of the sky when I'm inside my basement. And then for the quartz, that's just coming in from outside and then plugging in right up here. And then with the iron, doing something real similar, just plugging in from the outside there, and then going up to that first floor. So after the smelters and constructors, we've got this floor that's making all of the motors, and this is where I needed a second pump. And thankfully, I think it's the very next floor that needs the water, so I didn't need any more than this one. Because I put the elevator right here in the corner, which means for most of these, there's a lift right here, so I couldn't kind of connect these and make it easy to walk around. I just added some glass foundations to get over the belt, which inadvertently ended up making this whole section look much better than I think I would have normally made it. Because now it sections off all of the lifts and the pipes, and then I've got all my throughput monitors right down here, and I just really like the way that it came together. Other than that, not too much on this floor has changed. Go up to the cooling devices. This floor, however, I needed to get a little bit more creative. There ended up being a few more belts and pipes that kind of went all over the place. So I couldn't just use the straight glass foundations. These are actually glass roofs, but unfortunately, because of the lifts and where they were, I needed to use the 4 meter and not just the 2 meter. I would have liked to keep it a little bit more shallow. But so the lifts didn't clip through, I had to use the 4 meter. But I can still get up and over all of the belts and pipes. I've got all my throughput monitors. all of this chaos to make some heat sinks, circuit boards, and cooling devices. The high-speed connectors get their own floor. And since it's only one recipe, not a whole lot of belts, so I got to keep everything nice and flat. Out of all the floors, this one's probably the most straightforward. And because I made this section right here, part of me wanted to flip all the lifts around so that they were all facing this way. Like, this one doesn't have a choice. I had to face that one this way. But most of the lifts are facing out, because normally when I do stuff like this, I like to be able to see it from the outside. However, because I kind of made it a feature on the inside of the factory, part of me thinks I should have flipped them around. I'll probably leave it like this. We'll see what it looks like when I turn it on, and you can let me know what you would have done. And the final floor needed a little bit more clearance because of the extra belts, but with these ones I was able to use the more shallow roofs. Lots of belts, lots of throughput monitors. So I guess I don't need that one. I placed them all in this spot, and then placed the roofs and realized I needed to move them all over. Now I don't have an extra one. Just like before, we've got the two manufacturers making the radio control units, and then the last one's making the turbo motors. Just a little bit of polish, but not too much has changed here. The final floor, good old storage, which now has a roof. I thought about adding these lights to more places on the inside, but I already placed just a ton of them doing it this way. I felt like it would just be maybe a little bit too much for one factory. We'll keep it as just this for now. Even though there's not a lot going on up here, I'm really glad I didn't try to cram it into a different floor. Well, I think it's that time. I'm gonna head downstairs and we can see how long it takes for these storage units to start getting parts. There are a whole lot of parts to get sent into the factory to get this thing going, but thankfully, a whole bunch of them are grouped up right here. I'm gonna start with the copper sheets because those are on the slowest belt and they've got some load balancing to do, so that's just gonna take a minute. Then I'll turn on the iron and the quartz, and then I'll come back here and get everything else sent in the factory, and we'll watch it all come to life. And let's go ahead and start the stopwatch. And now let's send in everything else. And clean up my mess. And there it is. The first actually automated turbo motor. And since I'm making 3 a minute, they pop out fairly quickly. The last throughput monitors. See how long this takes. Should be 3, 3, and then 4 for the last one. Right now it looks like it's staying at 3 for the turbo motors, 3 for the cooling systems, and 4 for the radio control units. Feels so good to have these done. Even though I'm not making these in high quantities at all, in the grand scheme of things, it's not going to take all that long to fill up these storage containers. And then that's going to end up being a whole bunch of sync points. Because even at these rates, I'm just not going to use that many of this stuff. I don't think anyways. It's always a good idea to come down to the logistics floor and make sure that everything's running smoothly. And that's another reason I like setting up my factories like this, and I do all of this ridiculous extra work for the load balancing. Since all of the belts are supposed to just flow, none of them should be stopping. Even though there's a whole lot going on, it's usually fairly easy to see if there's an issue, so by having it where all of the belts just kind of flow, actually makes it a lot easier for me to spot any of the problems. Thankfully, this space was big enough and it wasn't too bad to make sure that there was no clipping and all that sort of a thing. But if I were to do it again, I'd probably give myself one more foundation worth of space. And that is going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for being here. And a special thank you to those that like, comment, and even share the videos. It really does help the channel, so thank you very much. Even though the main focus was the turbo motors, this was a really productive video. And I've now automated supercomputers, fused modular frames, cooling devices, the radio control units, and the turbo motors. They're in very low quantities, and so for the most part, they're only really there to feed my own storage and dimensional depots, but now it also means that I can build whatever I want that require those parts. And I'm going to take advantage of that in the next one. Now that I have pretty much all of the new parts taken care of in this phase, now I get to start working on some space elevator parts. Even though it probably doesn't make the most amount of sense, because I need the fewest of them, I'm going to start with that delicious pasta. So look forward to that, and thanks for watching.